You've had quite a few changes in the band. How does this in fact affect you?
It creates a lot of hard work. We've been really lucky with this set of 5 people in that it's come together in a matter of a few months, as opposed to like nearly a year for the old bands.
David, you took over from one of the sort of top vocal spots in the country, in the world almost, with Deep Purple. Just how difficult was it for you?
It wasn't too bad really, because the members of the band I was working, were really great human beings. They didn't make me feel as if I was replacing anybody. It made me feel just like a member immediately,
We had a jam, and within the first minute or two, I could tell that they were into the same things I was into.
Drugs, groupies, hypodermic needles. So what have you got to say about that?
Love it all.
If you don't get the gig, you're coming to my house tonight. We're gonna party.
Now look, lads, it's Tommy went back to the hotel and got a bit of sleep. Ended up on the roof naked one day. The neighbor called the cops. It was California, mid-70s. I mean, goodness me. What was he going to be, drinking milk?
Snorting coke off strippers' bottoms, and wasn't that the normal thing to do?
It was a guitar case full of cocaine.
I didn't like the man I was becoming, but I couldn't stop this fucking merry-go-round. I couldn't stop it.
I just went out at that point.
He had gone insane.
They'd let the tires down on our plane.
Well, I knew he was dead. They were putting me in jail for being the last person to see him.
Murder, which is what it was. It was not an accident.
I don't know how we got out of that country alive.
That's it, isn't it? It's over. It was like late 72 or even the middle of 72. Trapeze were playing at the Whiskey A Go-Go 3 nights or 4 nights, and I noticed in the audience, Jon Lord was there one night, Ian Paice was there, Richie was there like separately, and I just figured these guys were really big fans of trapeze, or they were becoming, fans of trapeze, and very vulnerable and naive back then, and it's sort of the same thing happened in the Marquee in London, and they each came and a couple of times. And then, I had a feeling they were there for another reason, and I just didn't realize at the moment they were going to ask me to join, And at the time, their album Machine Head and Made in Japan were very, very popular. And Made in Japan was probably the first great live album. And they captured that album very, very strongly in Japan. I look back now only it exploded. And it was after Ian Gillan actually left in 73, I guess, that we became aware of the 2 versions of Smoke on the Water, both in the American top 10 at the same time, and all the way down the charts of that year were purple tracks, and that was the year also that we became the biggest selling artists on the Billboard chart, all of which was actually due to the work that Ian Gillan and Roger Glover had put into the band, along with the other 3 of us.
not actually due to Glenn and David. They joined in and took it, helped us to take it on from there, of course. And we became one of the big selling rock bands.
So, you know, when they came and flew me to New York to see them play at Madison Square Garden, lo and behold, after the show the next day, we had a board meeting somewhere in a hotel, and they asked me if I wanted to play bass in Deep Purple, and I was quite shocked, as I was a singer, bass player. So I just, you know, made a quick decision on the knowledge that they were going to ask Paul Rodgers to be the lead singer, and I would be playing bass, and have this idea of maybe I could sing some stuff with Paul. And that was the initial reaction for me joining, so it didn't happen that way because Paul had already started Bad Company. And then, of course, when we got to audition, the only singer we auditioned was a young David Coverdale.
David was just a piece of tape to us. He just sent a little tape in and we listened to it amidst quite a few others. And quite honestly, he was the only one that had the vaguest sort of knowledge about what he was doing. That was only 4 bars. He sent about a 15-minute tape in. About 30 seconds of it were good. The rest was rubbish. But you could tell from that 30 seconds with a bit of work it was there.
Very, very, very bluesy. The great tone that he had, and untapped. That David would be an amazing, you know, performer for us, you know. So, hence we got that 2 northern guys, soulful rock guys singing together. And you know, David will probably tell you that one of his influences was Paul Rodgers at an early age. So, it was a great thing.
David had talent in bucket loads, and we saw that immediately, I think. What a hard job to step into Ian Gillan's shoes, although he actually brought his own shoes, let us say. I mean, Ian, like, thin, handsome, hippie-looking dude, you know, with all the moody qualities required, and there was David, you know, a trouser salesman from North Yorkshire, stepping into those, standing in front of the same mic. It was a hard job.
David was a guy that we all thought had the qualities to go all the way, and a very bright man, very funny, and had a great, great tone to his voice. So, you know, and he also had a tremendous thirst for this. You know, we could see that. And I thought it was the greatest thing that Purple ever did, was to have an unknown guy come in, because it was a very ballsy thing to do.
I think one of the miracles of rock and roll music history is how incredibly quickly David Coverdale took to being the lead singer of an immensely popular band from nowhere. More power to him for that. Immense courage, and immense ability, of course, it goes without saying. I mean, within just months of him joining Deep Purple, he'd made one of the best Deep Purple albums and was appearing in front of upwards of 400,000 people at the California Jam. That's some chutzpah, that is. The man had immense courage.
Hanging out was a big thing for David and I, talking music, listening to music, becoming friends, and that relationship has stood the test of time all these years. And I'm the only one that David hangs out with, and he's the only one I hang out with, so that is good to go.
I think to be a successful front-line man, guitarist or singer in a rock and roll band, especially one that achieves stadium rock status, I think you have to have an ego. you have to have a talent to support that ego. But I don't see, you can't be a shrinking violet and stand in front of 250,000 people and sell the music properly. It just wouldn't work. Look at the greats that achieved it, from Jagger to Freddie Mercury and onwards. This is, it's all about ability and ego married in the right proportion. And I think David Coverdale had that.
I think, the wedding of the appetite would have been down at Clearwell Castle in Gloucester when the bonding of the band, before we went to the studio. This is so important that we could become friends. But remember now, you got 2 new guys in the band, and it was an integral part that the band was now fresh and new again. Something that Blackmore has relished all through his career, is having new lifeblood. After a couple of years, he likes to change musicians, and this was no different.
You only have to listen to Burn and say, yeah, that guy had a chutzpah.
Cities ablaze, the stars on fire, woman's flames are reaching higher. We were fools, we called a liar. Is Burn.
You couldn't really have 2 guys come in that sounded like Roger and Ian Gillan. It wouldn't have been the right thing to do, So having 2 guys come in that had a different aspect of singing and playing was a big major key for the album that was to become Burn.
Warning came, no one dead. Others sinking was stood instead. When it came, no one was spared. Still
Burn was a fortunate album. It was absolutely the right album, because all those that said, "Oh, what's going to happen to them now? Gillan's gone," heard Burn and went, "Whoa, okay, so they are going to be all right."
I was coming in. I'd been touring with Trapeze in America for 3 years. I was quietly confident that we would be able to do this. As I said before, the key element behind this, I think, is David is a knife, friendship. And going into the studio, having worked the vocal parts out. David and I worked those parts out alone, without any other band members being around. We sort of knew when we would step up to the mic, well, shall I go now? Or, oh, please, after you. It was like, there was no ego about, I wanted to sing that part, damn it, or, oh, damn, I wish I could have sang that. Very obvious from the first track, Burn, that who was going to sing what. It was quite obvious where I would sing and quite obvious where David would sing. And that was the blueprint of the Hughes and Coverdale vocal throughout those 3 albums with Purple.
There was a kind of new boy, old boy thing. I mean, Blackmore, Paice and myself, we'd been together at that point, 6 years? And had a certain way of being with each other, and the band was run a certain way because that's the way we'd been running it for all those years. And so I think for Glenn and David it must have been a bit tricky to step in. Also, it's a bit tricky with David because Glenn had been given the post of bass player before David was auditioned. So Glenn already was in the band, and Glenn, as you know, has an astonishingly good voice. So that was a bit difficult for David as well. Who was actually going to be the lead singer? And I think the reason for that was quite specifically because Glenn wasn't quite the right voice for the lead singer of Deep Purple that we thought, and it was what David brought to the table that was more what we saw as the lead singer. He ticked quite a few boxes for Richie, because Richie wanted a more bluesy singer than Ian Gillan was. I've never believed, by the way, that that was the right choice. I've always believed that Ian Gillan's type of voice and the way of looking at vocals and lyrics was the right voice for Deep Purple and always will be. You know, and I've said that on many occasions, and I will always stick by that. But what David brought was astonishingly good, but it changed things.
Yeah, let's be clear. Everybody knows that Deep Purple was centered around Blackmore and his eccentricity both on and off the stage. And let's be clear also that he, at that time, was one of the top 3 guitar players on the planet. The Holy Trinity, maybe Jeff Beck, Eric Clapton, and Jimmy Page and Ritchie. And those guys were the key elements of the early 70s. And it was a very guitar-driven band, although John's organ was very dominant. I thought the camaraderie and the vibe we had going on Burn was monumental. And it was a great, great rock album. You know, it was a really big record.
Burn really was the almost perfect album that could have been made by those forces, in my opinion, because it retained a huge amount of what Deep Purple had learned up to that point when Ian Gillan left. It kept a lot of that Purple sound and the way of looking at rock music. And David sort of fitted himself into that brilliantly. When we go on from there, I begin to question the direction slightly. That's where I start to lose belief. And the direction change drove Ritchie out, in fact. That's what caused Ritchie to leave.
We're going to do a song which Ritchie wrote. It's behind us. Yeah. Woo!
The thing with Burn was we toured America and Europe on Burn. We never got to Japan on Burn, unfortunately. You know, you can see the footage from live performances of the Burn tour, and you can see a young David Coverdale. And if you notice back then, he wasn't introducing a lot of songs. He was still finding his feet. Of course, he's the great commandeering frontman of today. But back then, and nobody ever put a gun to my head to introduce songs. It was just a natural thing for me to do that. And like I said, David and I had a great relationship.
The California Jam to me, I'm a bit ambivalent about it. I mean, it was an astonishing occasion. I mean, so many people. Just, you know, you get out on stage and see that many people. It's massively intimidating. So what I did is I played to the front 3 rows. I mean, that's all I could do. You know, just say, okay, you guys are my audience tonight. You know, I can't possibly hope to reach the guy a quarter of a mile away. You know, it's unbelievable. It was almost ruined by the. And I have to say, this was not Ritchie's fault. It has been reported that it was Ritchie's fault that we nearly didn't go on. We had a contract that stated quite specifically, in black and white, that Deep Purple would go on at sunset, because we wanted to be, we were offered headline position, we accepted headline position, and we wanted to be the first band that would use lights. It was quite simply, we wanted it to be a piece of theatre, and that was in our contract. So when they said, we're running strangely early, can you go on in 15 minutes? Ritchie looked at his watch, looked at the sun and went, no. They came to the rest of the band and we said, no, it's sunset. Ritchie took it a slightly step further and locked himself in his caravan. So we couldn't go on. And the promoters were ABC Television. And it was being filmed by them, and it was all rather a big deal. And there were 400,000 people waiting until Richie decided that it was actually sunset. But you know, he was right. It was in our contract. Thus, he was stoked when he got on, a little angry. Thus, he played brilliant. I mean, he's playing like a demon up there. But that unfortunate cameraman that got in his way, and that unfortunate camera that got in his way, ended up costing us, I think, $75,000, but which in 1974 was a lot of money.
I don't bring California Jam up because it's like my calling card, but it just happened to be in the mid-70s the biggest concert event ever. 250,000 tickets were sold. I think anywhere between 350 and 400,000 people were there. It was a great moment for the band, hence Richie's smashing of the guitar neck into the camera, and the blowing up of the amps, and some of it was out of tune, you know, and the white suit I was wearing. It's like, yeah, it's there for everyone to see. But that was just part of the Deep Purple well-oiled machine. It was a very dangerous stage to be on. We were all fire and brimstone. You didn't want to be on a Deep Purple stage if you weren't invited. It was like a dangerous place to be. And that was the epitome of what rock music should be. It's not supposed to be polite and yes sir ma'am, thank you, no sir ma'am. It was a big, hairy ass, get out of the way. Any member at any moment could do something volatile, and that's what I love about 1974 Deep Purple, 1975. It was dangerous, and that's how it should have always been.
I mean, you can't imagine the California Jam now without Richie destroying the camera with those amazing stabs of the guitar, and B, nearly blowing himself to smithereens with the guitar cabinet going up in flames. Over applied amount of petrol by a rather enthusiastic roadie, putting far too much kerosene in it. We just ran off stage and got on a helicopter. I mean, it was such a high energy thing, and you had to be so good for that many people. You wanted to be, and the other bands that were on, I mean, there were some terrific bands on, so we wanted to be as good as we possibly could be. I just remember this immense stress level and wanting to play so well.
Friction really came in the form of Richie wanting to do some other kind of music. When we started to prepare for Stormbringer at Clearwell Castle, Richie didn't come in with a lot of material. I think he came in with one song, Stormbringer, and Soldier of Fortune, and the rest we had to write pretty quickly. A lot of stuff was written by John, myself, and David, because Richie didn't have a lot of things in his arsenal. I think at this time, even early in the stages of Stormbringer, he was thinking about moving along, moving to something new. I think he wanted to play more Bach-influenced rock music, sort of the medieval thing he's into today with more electric, and he was also already thinking of Ronnie Dio. It's the kind of music that doesn't appeal to me. So I think doing what he wanted to do was a great thing for him. It was also a very sad time to lose a major member. But once again, I think Stormbringer is a great melodic rock album with some groove to it. I wouldn't say it was funky. That's a word, it's really been overused. I think it's a groovier rock album, more melodic, and the songs are stronger on a Stormbringer than Burn. I think my favorite Deep Purple album.
I'm, again, a little ambivalent about Stormbringer. It's when I began to think, what are we actually doing here? Where is the band going? And as I've said before, benefit of hindsight, I should have left with Richie. I really think that when Richie said, I've had enough, because of the direction Stormbringer took, I wish I had the... Well, I actually did think it was over, but I think I should have just stepped away at that point. Now looking back and listening objectively to Stormbringer, it's a very good album indeed. It has some great playing on it. It has some really good songs, some excellent moments. But to me, it's the beginning of the end of that Deep Purple, because the one that followed it with Tommy Bolin is to me not a Deep Purple album. It's a Tommy Bolin, Glenn Hughes and David Coverdale sort of album with really good help from two guys in Deep Purple.
Coming out of nowhere, dropping hot rain, Stormbringer dance on the thunder again. Dark cloud gathering, breaking the day. No point running 'cause it's coming your way.
The title track is a great rock song. You know, I mean, it's another terrific Blackmore riff. But again, lyrically, not my cup of tea. Coming out of nowhere, driving like rain. What is a Stormbringer actually? I'm not terribly sure. I'm being a bit sniffy about it, but it's not my cup of tea lyrically. But it's a terrific track.
Stormbringer coming. Time to die.
You know, we'd already all the band had now moved to LA from England. We've all got houses in LA, and Richie was out in Malibu, and so was John and David, and I was in Beverly Hills with Ian. We had homes 2 streets away from each other, and it was at this time when we only did one show that winter, and obviously it was the summer in Australia. I'd never been there, and Purple had been there before. We flew out for this one gig in Sunbury, and it was raining. I remember that. It was like a mud fest.
I just remember being about as jet-lagged as I've ever been, because we flew straight down, did the show and flew off again. I mean, astounding to be asked to do that kind of thing. It wouldn't happen now.
Saturday night, Sunbury 1975, and the vibes are really good here. The temperature's way down. I think it's about 14 degrees on the Sunbury Rock Concert site. We've managed to get one of our guys through the security ranks, and we'll cross to him right now. It's over to Trevor Smith.
Dave Coverdale, prior to going on stage at Sunbury, about 20 minutes' time. What's your impression of the festival so far?
Yeah, we've got great vibes here. It's a really nice atmosphere. We came down about an hour ago, and it's really groovy, man. It's really groovy. John, have you anything to add on that, John?
Well, it's groovy as well, mate. I think it's absolutely bonza.
Can I ask you what you thought of Sunbury?
Really good, really good.
You enjoyed it despite the mud?
Yeah.
It's like you're packing in for the day.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy Sunbury?
Yeah, no worries.
What was the best thing about Sunbury?
Sex.
The music, the atmosphere, it's terrific.
The beer, the mud, the beer. Oh, no, that was
I say the beer.
No, the mud.
It was a one-off show. We flew in and we flew out, but at this time, this is the time when Richie was debating whether he should leave, and I think he knew it at this time. I think some members might have felt some friction at this point.
You have to remember that by 1974, the band was 6 years old, which at the time was a long-lived band. You know, I mean, some bands didn't last more than 10 minutes, you know, let alone 6 years. So, and I felt that I was fighting a slightly losing battle against. I didn't have the courage, I have to be honest with you, I didn't have the courage, I think, to leave myself. Although, when we got later on into Richie leaving and deciding to put another guitarist in, that's when I fought a long battle against. I just wanted out at that point.
I want to make this clear. I was very privileged and proud to play with the members of Deep Purple, the Mark III generation. I was not a major fan of Mark II Purple. It wasn't the kind of rock that I listened to growing up. It was it was too traditional for me. It wasn't, and once again, not using the word funk here, it had no sex in the music. There was no groove to it. There was no. I like music that makes me want to move, not think. I want to be able to think. I just move and just, you know, that's the kind of music I like. I never stepped into Deep Purple and Roger's shoes to stick our fingers up and say, well, I'm going to just do it the way I do it. Ian Paice and I had formed a relationship as a rhythm section that was a different rhythm section to Roger Glover. It needed to be different. Ian Paice in 1971, 72 and 73 was the greatest percussionist snare drum player in rock. He'd taken his stuff from Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson. He'd taken it up a step further, and he was great. And now Ian was probably listening to more of the stuff that I might have been playing in the car or in his house. I lived together with Ian for a while. He was becoming more interested in probably the groovier music that I was listening to. I'd have to say that was a fact. In trapeze, over the last couple of years, 71, 72, people would offer me all kinds of drugs and I would refuse them. I was a very light drinker. I didn't have a drink problem either, so I was more interested in where was the stage and have I got my, you know, 7-Up to drink, and I didn't like pot, cannabis, any of those drugs, didn't like downers or uppers, and I refused cocaine for many, many years, and it was very obvious that when Purple was so big that that kind of iconic status brings out the scum of the earth, i.e. drug dealers and pimps and whores and, you know, circus people and, you know,